if they will not adapt, if they will not grow, if they will not be able to change what they think or what they do, you're limited right then and there.
If you don't get back on that horse, you'll never ride again. If you don't get back up on that horse will never let you on their back again.
Welcome to Evolve Ventures, the one place where leaders like you can dependably go to shift your consciousness to unlimited potential. I'm your host, Bianca Thomas.
And I am your host, Emilia Smith. Welcome back to Evolve Ventures. We're grateful that you joined us today. We have episode 106, the difference in a fixed mindset versus growth mindset culture. And we want to dive into that. And we're going to get into some stories here to really kind of bring this down to ground zero. But before we jump into that, take a peek at 105. 105, Bianca and I went into what is culture, and she and I kind of like defined that for each one of us and went into a little bit about how it's shaped both of us. This month of June, happy Pride Month, we are going into all different facets of culture and looking at it from different angles that get us really excited, and taking all of our research and all of our findings and all of our experiences and those that we've shared and bringing them forward to you so that you can walk away with some tangible outcomes, some strategies, some tips, some tools that will help you in your life wherever you are in your evolution journey. So that being said, I will get started and I will try to keep it brief. But when I was thinking about fixed versus growth mindset, there was so many different, like in culture, specifically, we're talking about culture. So if you look at the definition, cultures can mean so many different things, but I'm kind of thinking for context of this conversation, like communities, right? So like if you step into a community that's fixed mindset, how do you know the difference? Whereas if you're in a community that has a growth mindset, right? So Bianca and I will try to, through our stories, try to help you see what is the difference of that, because you might not have ever thought of this before. And you're not wrong for that. But the only thing that we want to help you do is to understand and identify when you might be in a growth mindset culture versus when you might be in a part of or involved with a fixed mindset, and why. What can you lose? What can you gain based off of that? So for those of you who don't know this part of my past, it's kind of going to be an interesting walk down memory lane. But I told Bianca, it's like, there's so many different things that I could talk about when it comes to culture and the difference between a fixed and growth mindset. And I'm going to try to do this one because I grew up in a culture of farmers. And so you wouldn't necessarily immediately go to farmers to think about fixed and growth mindsets per se, but I have this distinct memory. So I grew up, I loved horses. Horses, I was always enamored by. They were just like the most majestic creatures, whether it was like I was a little girl drawing horses to growing up wanting, like every time we drove by a farm, I would like literally everything in my bones was like, I need to be around horses, and they just like, I don't know, they did something very special for me. I was an animal lover at heart, always have been, always will be. And what's better than this giant animal that's 2,000 pounds that won't eat me? Bears are cute and all, but like horses, like, like I just always had such a reverence for them. And so long story short, my family worked really, really hard. My dad was an entrepreneur. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My mom actually, both my mom and my dad grew up with horses. My mom before she even bought herself a car, she bought herself a horse, a thoroughbred, cool, which is like the race horses that we typically know or see on like Seabiscuit, movies like that. And my dad had, I want to say an English pony, which was like this white, beautiful, majestic pony growing up. So both my parents had horses. So obviously I grew up in a family culture that had already a reverence to horses. So naturally, those are pointed out. They have appreciation for me. And so we're driving by all these horses. And eventually I say, I want to take lessons. We don't have horses, but what can I do to maybe get on the back of a horse. And I remember at the time I had friends who knew a farmer that had like 20 different horses. I would spend literally like, I would get off the bus and I'm talking, I was probably like 8 years old, maybe. And I like didn't want to do anything besides be in the smelly, stinky horse, smelly barn. Like I didn't want to do anything but ride horses, be around them, brush them. I even went to horse camps. Like literally, I would muck stalls of poop for free for fun growing up. And I eventually took lessons. My parents eventually agreed to say, yes, like get on the back of a horse, like that'll be fun. And I remember at the time, one of the lessons that I would do is I would get on a horse. I would have a specific assigned horse and I would get on her back and we would ride around a ring. And we would go, for those of you who aren't familiar with just like riding and horse lessons in general, you would go in circles essentially, and you would do different postures while sitting on the horse. You would learn how your legs squeezing their belly would make them go faster, move over to the right, move over to the left, and you would sync up with your horse. One of the most magical things. And I remember I'm getting like goosebumps. My body remembers this. I remember getting started to trot, and trotting is essentially like a light jog for a horse. So flip, flop, flip, flop, and you're supposed to move, bounce. It's called posting in the horse world, in the equestrian world. You're supposed to bounce with the horse so that when the horse goes up, you also go up, so that you guys aren't clashing and the poor horse's back isn't breaking every time you're sitting in the seat.
I can only imagine like your inner thighs at that moment, because you're like squeezing the horse and you're like popping a watermelon while trying to like hold the horse.
Exactly.
Like, hold yourself up.
Exactly. Like equestrian is one of the most challenging sports, because think about it. You're like on this huge horse and you're trying to hang on. They're like, you have reins, which are the things that your hands hold. And some of us might hold the saddle, which is what you're sitting on, the seat, you know, when you're first getting started. But when the horse starts moving, it's a 2,000-pound creature. It is moving. There is nothing stopping you from falling off aside from your legs, like you said, your inner thighs squeezing. And so I'm learning how to like move with this horse, right? Posting up, and I'm squeezing with my inner thighs. And I'm like, my body, like I'm this little girl with this huge horse, and my trainer's in the middle of the ring, like, yep, you're doing great, doing great. I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm freaking out.
I feel like that's why people who ride horses have like such like thick legs and like big butt. It's like, because you have to like be able to stabilize yourself on that thing.
100%. I mean, that's where I got mine from. No, I'm kidding. But here's the thing. My mind, like you don't naturally, when you're like, I don't know how young or how tall I was. When you're like 4 feet, like almost 5 feet at like 8 years old, like when you're 11 feet high, trying to hang on for your dear life, your brain doesn't necessarily say go faster. Okay. Your brain is trying to keep you in safe town. And so we went from a trot. Okay, awesome. I got off the horse. Eventually lessons were over. The next day, my instructor says, okay, after we get a week done of trotting, you're getting really good. You're jumping up the learning curve quick. We're going to get you to canter. And I've seen people canter, and that's a horse going on a full-blown sprint.
Oh, Jesus.
There's walking, there's trotting, then there's cantering, and then there's galloping, which is just a free-for-all. Imagine horses in the movies that you've seen just running in the field. Okay. Cantering was one step below that. And I was at trot. Okay. One step away from walk. So you can imagine a little girl like me, like loving horses, always wanting to be, you know, like on the back of Spirit. If you've ever seen that movie, just like riding, galloping through the hills of Montana. How this will combine with fixed and gross mindset, I'll bring it back in just a second. But girl like me was like, all right, yeah, like nodding my head, like really excited for this. My body was quivering in fear. And lo and behold, a week later, I get up on that horse. I had to bring all of my courage to the table and just waited in sheer agony and terror for my instructor to say, all right, give her the good cluck, which means let's go. And the horse knows it because she's been trained to canter. And at that time, I remember we were starting to canter. Okay. My body's in sync with her. We're going. She's now picking up a speed. My legs right now, I'm telling you, have like goosebumps on them. Like I haven't fully shook this, which is just incredible because I was 8 years old. I'm 27 now. So almost 20 years ago. My body knew. It just knew that this was not going to end well, my whole being. And I was clinging on for dear life. I believe at the time I was clinging on to the saddle, which like obviously any inexperienced rider, you just don't do. With that being said, I was coming around a corner, coming around a turn, and she bucked, which in horse riding, it's like if you've ever seen a bucking bull, like that's what my horse did. She kicked her legs up. She was not having it. I might have been digging into her belly at a certain point or whatnot. She was not having it. She bucked me right off. My little body, I swear it felt like if I was flying 30 feet in the air.
Jesus.
Landed hard on the sand. Luckily, I was in a sand arena. And I swear to God, I felt like the person after a bull, like just got bucked off a bull. I needed to like get the heck out of there because I was going to get charged with like horns. But like, no, this horse just like stood there, looked at me and was like, yeah, that's what you're going to get, you know, when you cling on to me like that. And in that moment, I thought like I was broken, bones broken, everything, nothing. No, I was unscathed. I was shooken up. Every rider knows that you have to go through that experience because what does your instructor say right after? Emilia, you got to get right back up. I'm like, what? Crazy woman? What are you talking about? Get it back up on that horse. It just bucked me off. Like I'm offended and I'm also like scared. And here's the thing. There is a deep belief within horse culture that I learned that day, which I think we learn in our every single day in our own cultures, which was if you don't, and here's a great indicator of those beliefs of fixed mindsets. If you don't get back on that horse, you'll never ride again. If you don't get back up on that horse will never let you on their back again. And I was like, what? Of course it would. I'm the rider here. No. There is a deep fixed belief that if you do not get up back on the horse after you fall off, you will just not ride again. And now I understand it's because you have way too much fear. You'll never get on the horse again. And number two, the horse will never, like, it's a bond that you build and kind of an assertion of dominance to some degree to make sure that the horse knows that you're not afraid of it and that it can't just do that and get away with it. Right. So that fixed belief I needed in that moment if I wanted to continue horseback riding. Now I got back up on that horse, but I was crying. I was terrified. And I had to understand that that one fixed belief helped me to improve my overall skills of riding, of growing. And that is the only time I can tell you that a fixed belief, a fixed mindset helped me grow. And Bianca, you had asked this question, like, how does that relate to the fixed and growth mindset? And when the thing is, like, when you feel as though you have been told a way of doing and being and a subscription of beliefs in life, there's always cultures where you have a box that you need to fit into in order to be a specific thing, a certain someone. And if you're not, there are consequences. That is a great indicator of a fixed mindset. My instructor 100% had a fixed mindset when she said that to me. But it's also an understanding that if you want to grow, you need that belief. You need to understand the importance of that. Whereas in a lot of different fixed mindset cultures, you don't necessarily need that fixed belief to grow. You need that fixed belief to stay exactly the way you are, to subscribe to the culture, to subscribe to the norms, to subscribe to the box that wants to keep you small rather than to have you grow. Does that make sense, B?
Yeah.
Bridge the gap for me, girl.
I'm going to transcode a little bit. I don't think your instructor had a fixed mindset. I think she knew what would happen if you like, how do I think it was like a very fixed belief within a growth mindset, because the mindset was you have to get back on, you have to keep trying, you have to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a belief that could lead to a fixed mindset, which is, I can't do this.
Yeah.
When we think about growth versus fixed mindset, the primary difference is a growth mindset. You have the belief that that you can learn, that growth is possible. I can learn, I can try. And as long as I keep trying and putting in effort, I will eventually get there.
Mm.
A fixed mindset is you are born with certain traits. You are born a certain way. And some people are, and some people aren't. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of my life, I had a fixed mindset. I grew up in a very fixed mindset culture. And with the topic of culture, I've actually been speaking to a lot of different people in different cultures, but some that are similar to mine. So I was talking to someone on Instagram yesterday, and she's Italian.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, you know, it's really interesting how similar all of our cultures are. And I said, 100%. Old school traditional cultures, a lot of them do have a very fixed mindset. Girls are supposed to be one way, boys are supposed to be another. This type of person is supposed to do this thing. This type of person is supposed to do that. We don't believe these certain things, and my house, my rules, you're going to follow what I say.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there's so many people who are brought up in cultures that are that way. And since it's Pride Month, I'll briefly go into this. When I was growing up, and it wasn't just my parents, it was my entire culture. There was this very fixed, known belief and understanding that we will not accept you if you are gay. We don't do that. We're not going to change. We don't need to change. And if you are, then you're wrong and you need to stop. That's a fixed mindset. Now imagine what that does to someone. If you don't believe that your family, your parents, your whoever, whatever the community is that you're in, if they will not adapt, if they will not grow, if they will not be able to change what they think or what they do, you're limited right then and there. And bringing that back to Emilia's point about getting back on the horse, if she never got back up, if she wasn't in a community, in a culture that taught her, no, this is how you learn. We grow here. You're going to change. We're going to help you change. She never would have gotten back up.
Definitely not.
But unfortunately, there are so many of us who are not brought up in cultures like that. We're not brought up in communities like that, where you are taught that change is possible, that change is okay, or that people will change. How many of us grew up in families or in environments that said, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Hands down, the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
100%.
Because it's just not true.
Scientifically false.
Scientifically false. We have all of these things in our brain that actually allow us to grow for our entire lives. And I'm not going to get super deep into the scientific part of it, but those components are there. What determines your ability to grow is the belief underneath that. And that's what determines the fixed versus growth mindset. Emilia was in a growth mindset culture, and there was the possibility of a fixed belief that I can't get back up. And if she didn't get back up, that belief would have stuck with her. Imagine how that would have impacted her for the rest of her life.
Would have never ridden ever again.
Never again. And how would that have impacted other components of your life?
I can't
You
imagine
never
my
would
life without it.
Right? You never would have believed that you could do things.
Yeah.
How many of us are brought up in cultures where we are taught that things just aren't going to change? Things are just the way that they are, and we need to just accept it. And I'm not just talking about Middle Eastern culture. I'm not just talking about Mediterranean, European culture. How many of us grew up in America with beliefs like that? For those of us who live in America, how many of us in business? Well, business is just done the way that it is. And, you know, my father did it this way, or my mother did it this way, or we've run this business this way for this many years, and we're not going to change.
Yeah.
Well, then
Good
your
luck.
business is going to fail. Well, then your family is going to fail. Because if your family, if your friends, if the people around you don't believe that growth is possible, that change is possible, that you're willing to try, they're not going to trust you. There's going to be no faith there. There's going to be no connection. And unfortunately, that's what I experienced growing up. It was the way that it was. Boys can do certain things, girls can't. Boys look a certain way, girls look a certain way. No, Bianca, you can't wear your backwards hat. You're a girl. No, you can't do this because we're Middle Eastern, and Middle Eastern people don't do that. That's very fixed mindset. And it limited me for so long. And now you also have to take into account how you interpret what you hear. And we briefly talked about that in the last episode, and we're going to talk about that in future episodes with regard to culture. But to start wrapping this up, you might have grown up in a fixed mindset culture, but it doesn't mean that you have to maintain that way. It is up to all of us. And I said this in the last episode, but it is up to all of us to work on the beliefs that we have developed over time. Because if you have a fixed mindset, it is not serving you. It is going to hurt you more than anything. I'll give you a perfect example of one that I had really quickly and how it impacted me. I grew up believing that I was not lovable. I'm not good enough. No one's going to love me. That was a very fixed mindset. So what did I do? I settled for whoever the first person was that came my way. Because, well, no one's going to love me. This person's there. Well, that's all I can get. So I have to do everything to make sure they stay. That led to multiple relationships that followed that pattern. It almost cost me my business. It almost cost me my life at a few times. It almost cost me everything. Because I didn't believe that love and happiness and worthiness and belonging were possible for me. So I settled. So I did things that I wouldn't typically have done. And how many of us out there are doing things like that? Maybe it's not relationships, but maybe it's school. Do you believe that you can go back to school? Do you believe that you can learn? How is that impacting the people around you? How is your belief creating that culture around you? The culture in your family, the culture in your friend group, the culture at your job. These things don't just impact you as an individual. Your beliefs impact the world around you. And when we start seeing it like that, we'll start taking a much higher degree of responsibility for what we think, do, say, and feel, and how we're interacting with the world.
My only question to close this out is what's your brain's go-to? Like, what is your belief around intelligence or smartness? Because this is typically where we find it the most. I'll give a lot of credit to Dr. Carol Dweck, who is a neuropsychologist. Like, she's just an incredible human and has a lot of work out there. Dr. Carolyn Leaf, a lot of the women in the neuroscience field that I personally look up to. And there's these two. Bianca spoke about, how the beliefs really can impact the rest of your world. And we talk about that very often. What is your belief when it comes to intelligence, when it comes to smartness, when it comes to your ability? Do you have, and this is a great way to really just look at the two for what they are and then move forward understanding what your current belief is? Because one of the worst things is not knowing where your current belief stands. Because you can be in an environment and grow up with a belief and not really even notice that you have that. It's like the frog in the boiling pot of water. You don't even know that it's getting warm, right? So what is your belief here? Do you believe that, like you had said, smartness, intelligence, your ability can grow, can change, it's malleable? If the answer is yes to that, if you believe that you can improve, you belong in the growth mindset. You have a belief that it is possible to grow, to develop. We call this the incremental theory of intelligence. And I say that just in case you want to look it up. The difference between the incremental theory of intelligence, which, by the way, only 40% of people have, 40% of people find themselves in the growth mindset culture bucket. The other 60% find themselves in the fixed. If you have a belief that I suck, I can't get better, I can't do this, my intelligence is fixed, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Things will never change.
Things will absolutely never change. This is who I am. This is how I'll always be. That is what we call an entity theory of intelligence, meaning it will not grow. And your brain studies show your brain, if you find yourself in that bucket, your brain is actually looking for everything in its environment to confirm that belief. Therefore, what's the scariest part about that is that you won't ever grow and there will never be evidence because your brain will never pick up on it. Our brains are machines that can do things for us if we set them to it, but not if we have a belief that's inhibiting that. So to round this out,
beautiful.
My episode suggestion, and why I say this is because of those two things. If you find yourself in one bucket, but yet you want to get out of it, say, for example, you find yourself having grown up in a fixed mindset where every person around you has that belief that like your abilities are fixed from the start. You're born this way. You don't grow. Like, you might feel so lonely because you might want to get out of that. And if you're an incremental theorist of intelligence, so you have that theory, you have the belief that, you can improve. You believe that change is possible and it's possible for you. You're in that 40% of people. You might feel ridiculously lonely because there's only 40% of you out there, right? The episode suggestion is 69. Are you in Lonely Land? Because Lonely Land can be one of thank you. Lonely Land can be one of the best experiences if you can embrace it and if you can leverage that to help you move forward in life on the growth mindset capabilities. Because like Bianca said, what would have happened if I never got back on that horse? If I believed that my abilities were fixed, that I can't get back up on that horse. I just can't, so many of us find ourselves in that moment. I just can't. Like, I literally can't bring myself. That's crying, shaking. Like, I feel like all my bones are broken. By the way, none of them were. That was the belief that I had. I can't do it. Like, I was so scared, so effing scared to get not back on the horse, but to be right back where I was, to prove to myself that I could be back here. That was the scariest moment. And if I never got back up on that horse because I let that belief override the belief, well, let's just try. I would have never had the relationship that I do with horses now. I would have never become a very skilled rider, would have never been able to teach other kids how to ride, would have never had, I have beautiful horses growing up, would have never been able to appreciate a deep understanding of life through horses, you know, and there's so much glory on the other side of that for, you know, that's just an analogy, but like for you, there's so much glory and so much fulfillment in life for you when you can help yourself override that fixed belief that might be present, that might be saying, we can't do this, right? It comes down to just a thought. You can. And if you can get around people that can help you build that belief, your life will change. If I didn't have that instructor saying you can do it, I would have been on that sand, butt in the ground for probably the rest of the day. I'm so grateful to her. She pushed me beyond what I believed I was capable of at the moment because my fear took over. So my takeaway from this, and then B, I'll transfer it over and have you send us off. The danger zone is not knowing what culture yours is, whether it's the fixed or the growth culture. The biggest danger in life, I think, is not knowing which one you are spending your time in. Because if you don't know, you can't grow. That is a fact. So B, what's your episode suggestion and your takeaway to send us off?
Number 32, how self-belief impacts motivation and goals. If you do not believe that you can do something, if you do not believe that you have the potential to change, to grow, to evolve, to make a difference, you will stay stuck where you are. You will stay feeling not good enough. You will stay feeling as though nothing is ever going to change and life is going to stay the way that it is, and that you're going to remain unhappy. And believe me, I know I was there. I have been there so many times. It's not even funny. And I think the takeaway is adopting a growth mindset. It can be really scary because there comes a point where you have to have faith that things will change for the better. And that's scary. Hope can be scary. Faith can be terrifying because most of us develop fixed mindsets to protect ourselves, because it's easier to believe that it's not possible than to risk failure of trying and busting your ass and then proving to yourself even more that your original fear was right. But you can never prove yourself wrong until you try. And that is my takeaway for this episode. Thank you so much to everyone for listening. Thank you for being part of this community, this growth-minded community. We have our private Facebook page, Evolve Venture Society. Today, this is going to be last week, we will have started the Your Evolve story in the Evolve Venture Society. Alex and Derek, both two of our team members, are hosting that. And it is an incredible way to hear from all of you, to hear from the community, to connect with all of you, and to start building that connection with more growth-minded people. So if you want to be interviewed, join the Evolve Venture Society group. If you want to view it, if you want to be in a community of people like you who are trying to get better and learn and do more and become more in a safe, loving environment, head over to Facebook, join the Evolve Venture Society.
So much love. We're grateful you joined us today, and we will see you on our next episode.
Bye, everyone.
Stay true to you. Bye, everyone.